Hello, whiskey lovers, and welcome to another one of Mark's Whiskey Ramblings. Now, this is a bit of a special rambling. It's a bit of a challenge to support your local spirits producers. It was a challenge that I got from my good friend Greg from Greg's Whiskey Guide, the guy from France. He also has a YouTube channel, and he challenged me and he said, Mark, in these pandemic times it is important that you support your local produce, so maybe you could produce a little rambling about local producers of spirits and such. I thought it was actually a good idea, so there we go. And they're in totally random order, not in any particular order. I will be talking about no less than 10 producers, and I will be starting off, of course, with the Belgian Owl. It's probably the best Belgian whiskey distillery, or the best known Belgian whiskey distillery, which can be found in Grasse-Sologne. And they filled their very first cask in October 2004, making their single malt available in shops for the very first time in 2008. So basically it is still a young distillery. But in 2011, Jim Murray, in his very famous whiskey Bible, awarded one of their single cask a whopping 95.5 points. Imagine that. I tried that single cask and I would not score it that high, but it does signify that what Etienne Bouillon, the master distiller at the Belgian Owl, is capable of. And then in 2013, that was a milestone for the Belgian Owl distillery, because then they acquired two stills from the famous obsolete Caperdonic distillery. And so they started making new make for whiskey on those two legendary stills. And in 2016, that new single malt from those stills was available on the Belgian market. And by now, they also export to the USA and Asian markets. So the Belgian Owl is really conquering the world, and rightfully so. In 2017, they finally got a core range. They've got the spirit, the identity, the passion, the intense, which is at cask strength, and the by Jove, which is actually linked to a famous Belgian comic. My favorite of the range, truth be told, and maybe you can already guess it because you know me a little bit, my preferred spirit is exactly that, their new make spirit. But the Belgian Owl, a beautiful Belgian single malt, something to look out for. Next up is Villiers. Villiers is a famous grain distillery, famous for its Genevers, even barrel-aged Genevers. They were already founded in 1880, and all those generations have been expanding on the range. But they've recently relaunched the great interest into barrel-aged Genevers. They have them from age 0 until, well, that's not barrel aged now, is it? From age 0, non-barrel aged, and then they've got a couple of barrel aged 8 years old up to 21 years old, and there is a renewed interest in their Genevers. But Firmin Villiers, the third generation, in 1928, he created a gin, and that's this one. Well, it's not this one, obviously, because this is the reintroduction. Villiers got the recipe and reintroduced the gin from Firmin from 1928, and they call it their Villiers Classic Dry Gin 28. The 28 not only refers to 1928 for the original gin, it also contains 28 botanicals. They also create fruit and crème Genevers, liqueurs, vodka, eggnog, and whiskey. They even released the very first Belgian whiskey to the market in 2007, a year prior to the Belgian Owl. They beat them to it just 1 year before the Belgian Owl. But their range is called Gold Lees, after the river Lees. Lees is the Leie in Flemish, it's Lees in English, because that turns gold due to the retting of flax in the water, hence the name Gold Lees. Now there is a Gold Lees family reserve, and then there's 6 editions with a finish. And like I said, they released it in 2007 for the very first time. In 2016, Villiers was also responsible for the very first Belgian rye whiskey called Sunken Still. Now I've tried all of them, and to be honest, I was not overly impressed. They're good, but they're good in their own right, let me put it that way. In 2019, however, they released the very first 10 years old single malt, and this one is fully matured on the sherry casks and out with the name Gold Lees and in with the name Villiers. Apparently they are very proud of their heritage, rightfully so, and also very proud of their single malt that is now no longer being released as Gold Lees, but as Villiers. And will you look at that packaging? I know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but this is a beautiful packaging, isn't it? It's got this beautiful, beautiful bottle which takes you back to the, what, 1920s maybe? Now this is a Belgian single malt that rested for 10 years on sherry casks only and is bottled at 43% ABV and is quite limited in numbers. But to be honest, like I said before, good, quite nice, dark fruit, but a quite light body. Oh well, it's a lovely whiskey, but it's not a whiskey that you will, if you invite friends over and you pour them this, it's a conversation piece. Nothing more, nothing less. But still, something to be proud of. If I'm really honest, what I like most about Villiers is actually their gin. Next on my list is Duvel. Duvel is a Belgian brew. Now, I'm sure you will all agree that Belgium is best known for its beers, and it's fair to say that Duvel is one of the most famous Belgian brews. But when the distillery began, when whiskey began booming about 10 years ago in early 21st century, they distilled their beer and they released it as a 3 years old in 2009. And then again they surprised us. People were lining up around the block for this. In 2013 they did that again with their whiskey released as a 6 years old. And at the end of last year in 2019 they came back with a 10 years old limited edition. Now they do not call their whiskey. They call it Duvel Distilled. And to be honest, I think that's a good idea because I'm not very fond of their Duvel Distilled. It tastes more like a grain Geneva than a whiskey in my humble opinion. It's a nice something to have. It's a nice conversation piece. It's the most famous Belgian beer turned into whiskey. But that's the best you can say about that. The beer, however, oh my god, the beer. Well, they've got, they also have their Duvel, their regular Duvel, which is famous all over the world. Perhaps you've already had one of those. But they also have what they call the Duvel triple hop. And like the name says, it's produced with 3 types of hops. And there's different kinds. There's the Citra, etc. And there is the, this one was the Cashmere, the Duvel triple hop Cashmere. Oh my god, very good. The Duvel triple hop Cashmere was a limited edition, but it was so popular, people loved it so much that they actually decided early 2020 to put it out there all the time. So they've added this to the core range of Duvel. Apart from that, they also have this one, the Duvel Barrel Aged. And this is, like the name says, a special edition in which they have their Duvel age on bourbon barrels for several months. So there's always a limited edition. There's 4 of them already. They appear around Christmas in your local supermarket. 25 euros you can get one of these. And there's 4 batches so far. Batch number 2 is my favorite, but the taste difference is quite minimal, of course, but they're lovely. But the Duvel triple hop Cashmere, now that, ladies and gentlemen, is my absolute favorite of the Duvel distillery. Cheers. And while I enjoy my Duvel triple hop, let me tell you a little bit more about another distillery which can be found in the German-speaking part of the country, Rademacher. It's to be found near the Drie Landenpunt. That's how we call it in Flemish, Drie Landenpunt. That would translate into the 3 countries point. Let me put it that way. It's that point on the map where Holland, Belgium and Germany share borders. Well, very close to that point you will find the Rademacher distillery. And that one is best known for its 1836 gin, which is named after the year of the foundation, of course. But they also produce vodka, rum, vermouth, and they even have a whiskey as well. Now that whiskey is called Lambertus, which is named after Lambert Rademacher. Lambert Rademacher, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Lambert Rademacher, he was one of the founders of the distillery. But in all honesty, their whiskey, I am not very fond of their whiskey, and I'm being polite. I'll take it a step further. When I first tried their 10 years old grain whiskey, I had the gall to name it Aquavite Horribilis. I know it's not a nice thing to say, and that's not really promoting your local produce, but it's not because I'm talking about local producers that I don't have to be honest about how I feel. So their whiskey is totally not up my alley. And having said that, I haven't seen it around for over 2 years now, while their gin, the 1836 gin, is taking up more and more shelf space in shops all the time. I think that's a good idea because their 1836 gin, that is quite nice. But moving on, back to beers, because in Brakel you will find the Sangral Brewery. Sangral means Holy Grail, by the way. It's a brewery that not only releases its own beers, but also beers on premise. Beer on demand, let me put it that way. If you are looking for a special ale for a wedding, or as a corporate gift, or for your very own restaurant, you want your own beer, then the master brewer Wim Science is your man. But like many brewers, he also has a soft spot for distilling, and he created what is known as the Sangral single malt. It comes in both 50 centiliter and 20 centiliter bottles, but it is only available at the brewery slash distillery itself. Now, by now, it matured for 7 years on bourbon cask, and it is bottled at a whopping 63.0% ABV. 63, oh my god. I have tried it 2 years ago when it was only 5 years old, and it was bottled at the same strength. I have to say it was quite hot and candy-like, but good fun. Nevertheless, their beers are much more to my liking. Speaking of which, you'll forgive me for continuing to enjoy my brew right here. And then there's Guy Pirlo. He's a bit of a late bloomer. After a long career in telecommunications in 2007, he decided he wanted to make his own beer. Well, he had been doing this at his mother's kitchen table for a longer time, but in 2007 he went commercial. And it took until 2011 before his first ale actually hit the shelves, and it's called Kempis Vuur, which is basically, if you were to translate it, it would translate into campaign fire. And when that hit the market, I'm quite fond of a couple of those. For example, their Triple, or their Hoppergod, or their Haverstout. They are really up my alley. I do like those beers. Some of them are true drinking beers. Some of them are tasting beers, but they're good. They're good. But at one point, Pirlo was able to obtain 15 quarter casks from Lefroy, the famous island distillery, and he decided to distill some of his beer and mature it on those small casks. Now, the first 3 casks, aptly named L1, L2 and L3, those were released in 2016, and they sold out in a flash. It's the first peaty Belgian single malt. Now, remember, the big difference here is that it's not a peaty spirit they produced. No, the peaty tang in these whiskies is actually from the Lefroy quarter casks, of course. Now, cask L3 was the last one to really rock my boat, let me put it that way, which is this one. It's peaty indeed, but it's medicinal as well. You can actually detect the Lefroy, but it's got some plasticine, it's got some earthy notes in there as well. It's good fun. But obviously, the peat, in this case, from these whiskies, is from the cask and not from the spirit. Cask L4 was deemed not yet ready, so in 2007 we saw the release of cask 5, L5, which was the best so far, and L6. But then when cask L7 came out in 2018, that was a complete dud, apparently. And there have been no further releases of this whiskey, which is a pity because there are still 9 Lefroy quarter casks out there filled with the spirit of Kempis Vuur, campaign fire. So maybe we can be looking forward to some older campaign fire single malts. But in the meantime, we can enjoy their beers, obviously. It'll come as no surprise that our next guest is also a brewery, Wilderen. Wilderen is a brewery cum distillery in Wilderen, which is close to Sint-Truiden in Belgium, and it has been known for many years for their excellent beers. But in recent years, they also added the W Gin to their portfolio, which won Best Flavored Gin Awards in the World Gin Awards 2020. So they also have a rum, which is called Omerta, and that won a prize in 2019. So they know what they're up against. They produce good beers, they produce an award-winning gin, they produce an award-winning rum, but apart from that, they also produce whiskey, and that whiskey is named Wild Weasel. From Wild Weasel, there's a single malt, a finest blend, and some single cask releases, and some of them are at cask strength. And if memory serves, their first expression was released in 2014. I remember tasting it and going, but they took the liberty of putting one of their beers, Cuvée Clarisse, on those whiskey casks, creating a whiskey-infused beer. And now that is very much to my liking. It's a dark brown beer, chocolatey, beautiful, beautiful creamy mouthfeel. That beer, if you can find it, Cuvée Clarisse, they're already at their third batch at this point, I believe. That is very good. That is an outstanding beer that goes perfectly with your barbecue. Their whiskey, Wild Weasel, yeah, but their beers, good. Their gin, good. Their Cuvée Clarisse whiskey-infused ale, excellent. And then there's Braakman. Braakman is a grain distillery which was originally founded in 1918 but completely renovated, well actually completely rebuilt in another place in 1996, and it's famous for its Genevers, which is clearly a typical Belgian spirit. Since 1987 the company is run by the third generation Philippe Braakman, who added fruit and crème Genevers to the range, also some eggnog, some gin and whiskey. You could say they tested the waters in 2017 when they released a single grain from rye and barley that had matured for 9 years on a first fill bourbon cask from Four Roses. That was actually released by Dram 242, a local Belgian shop who took that leap of faith, and rightfully so, because that was really, really a good single grain from Belgium. And then Braakman confirmed again in 2018 with the release of another single cask. By that time it was 11 years old. So they decided to go commercial, and since 2019 they have released 4 more whiskies, some at drinking strength of 4 to 6%, others at cask or barrel strength. The only downside is I like the way they look great. I even like the way they taste great. This is a lovely, lovely Belgian whiskey, but the downside here is, unfortunately, they're quite expensive. But if money is not an object, go and find those Braakman whiskies, those Belgian whiskies from Braakman Distillery. You'll not be disappointed. Cheers. Speaking of disappointment, Thierry, Ludo, Gwen, Laurent et Pascal, 5 guys from Jean Blou in Wallonie, the French-speaking part of Belgium. They walk into a bar. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, isn't it? But it's actually the beginning of a new Belgian distillery, Wave Distill, which will open shortly. In 2016 they launched a crowdfunding campaign to create Scottish. Scottish is a pure malt whiskey that was finished on port and cognac casks. One of the guys, Thierry, is Thierry van Rentegem, and he already knew his way around whiskey and other spirits. He had, for example, already released Cosmic Vodka, Brutus 17th single malt, and the award-winning Jean Bleu gin. So he knows his way around spirits, but apparently Scottish is a 5 years old pure malt. Not sure what that means, and I'm not even 100% sure that this is actually a Belgian single malt, because, for example, the Brutus 17th is actually distilled just over the border in France. He's got a friend there, hence the cognac casks. So I'm not sure if the Scottish is actually a Belgian single malt. It is marketed as a Belgian single malt, let me put it that way. When I tried it, disappointment is too light a word, to be honest. But apparently Scottish is here to stay, because it seems to be very popular with the youth in the southern part of Belgium. So like I said, personally I found it lacking, to be polite. It was the kind of whiskey that would make me go, ooh, you know what I mean? But hey, if you pour it in a tall highball glass with lots of ice cubes and then mix it with some ginger ale, apparently it becomes a beautiful party drink. Me, to party, I'll stick to my Duvel triple hop. And lastly, let me tell you a little bit about Gouden Carolus, which is fast becoming the most famous whiskey in Belgium due to some inexplicable hype. I don't know where this is coming from, but Gouden Carolus is I'll explain. They are famous for their Gouden Carolus beers. They've got some great beers, indeed they do. And from the mash of one of their beers, their triple, they distill spirit to become single malt. Now remember, the distillery has only been active since 2010, so you can imagine that all of their whiskey is very young. Their first new malts, I have to backtrack a little bit, and they tried an early release with butt ugly bottles, and their single malt was banana liqueur, so they took it back off the market. It got rave reviews, negative negative reviews, so they took it back off the market and they rethought the whole thing, and then they came back with this newish single malt. Now, this new single malt hit the market in 2013. It was quite young and, in my opinion, iffy, to say the least. Since then, I remember when I tried it at first, I described it as a plum liqueur. It was not bad, but I was not impressed either. I would still say that of this very young Garden Caroli single malt. But anyway, since 2014, they have this yearly anniversary edition, which is also bottled in 50 centiliter bottles. 50 centiliters only. The first one was called the Cold Fusion, and today that one commands around 750 euros on the second-hand market. That's crazy, but there you have it. So for some reason there is this inexplicable hype around these bottles. Now I have to be honest, I've tried a few and they were all middle of the road to okayish. There's one or two exceptions that I thought, no, that's really good. An example was the Het Anker finish. That one was quite good. And there was also one that was bottled for Bresser and Timmer in Holland. That one was quite excellent, in fact. So they do have a couple of good whiskies, but not all of them. Not all of them. And the regular single malt, in my opinion, is okayish. The funny thing about Gouden Carolis is that they are clearly growing. I have to admit that. When they first started out, it was, but it keeps getting better. So to be honest, I'm quite curious about Gouden Caroli single malt in, say, 2 or 3 years' time. Now that might in fact become quite an interesting malt as opposed to this rather iffy regular single malt Gouden Carolis. Having said that, remember what I said about Wilderen? They have this dark chocolatey beer that they put in their whiskey cask. Gouden Carolis does the same thing. What they created was this Cuvée van de Keizer, the Emperor's Vintage. Cuvée van de Keizer, Gouden Carolis, whiskey infused. So they put this on their whiskey cask and allow it to mature. Now this beer has won numerous awards, and rightfully so, because this is a delicious beer again. Maybe I'm just fond of dark ales with a whiskey twist. Might be, could very well be. Why not? It is excellent. It is delicious. So if I were to choose between spending 50 euros on whiskey or 50 euros on a couple of these bottles, it would be an easy choice. Cheers. Well, that concludes this whiskey rambling because I'm all out of beer. Luckily, there's more in the fridge. Never mind. This is the end of this whiskey rambling, which, like I said, is a bit of a special one, highlighting some of the Belgian produce. Because with this pandemic, it is indeed important that you support your local producers. So buy local stuff. If you're in Belgium, try some of these Belgian products. You will not be disappointed. At least not in all cases. To be fair and honest, some of these are, but most of them are worth seeking out and trying. You have to try them at least. I'm not going to nominate anyone else to do this as well. I mean, you have to do this on your own. If you have a YouTube channel, or if not, just create a video promoting some of your local produce and put it on social media. It can help. In fact, yeah, it can help their local producers getting through this harsh times, because that's what it is. I had in fact planned of doing this little video out there in a park or something to get some nice scenery going and whatnot. But even here in Belgium, we are in the second wave of the pandemic, meaning that even if you move out in the streets, in a park, whatever, you have to wear a mask. So obviously it was impossible to film outside. I had to do it in the safety of my own home. But there you have it. So local produce, support them. It is necessary to make them survive these harsh times. And in the meantime, you too, please stay home, stay safe, and may the malt be with you.